Hello. So today I'm going to discuss an article that I really liked. It is an article, well, it's a substack written by Tulip R, which is Ritchie. Some of you, well, a lot of you who follow me probably know who Ritchie is. He's a detransition gay man who, like me, transitioned as an adult and, you know, has been in the trenches talking about his experience and kind of saying his bit for a while now. Anyways, this is his it's the title of this essay is called Where is the Line? A reflective essay. And when I read this actually a while ago, but when I read this, I thought, wow, this is really good. I like the way he did this, and he makes some really good points in here, and he makes some good points in here that I completely agree with, and the points he makes is some of the stuff I've been like railing against for a while. And I think he articulates it very well. And so I wanted to go over the essay and just kind of talk about some of the things he talks about in here and give like my perspective and stuff like that. I won't read it the whole thing word for word. You can go read it. I'll put a link, but I will touch on each piece of it. And overall, the way he sets this up, I think, is pretty cool. Um, he asks, "Where's the line?" And he uses the analogy of war, and like and boundaries, lines in war. Like, you know, this is my side, that's your side. We're fighting over territory. We're fighting over sites. And I think the analogy is an interesting one to use in this essay, and I kind of like that. Um, So I'll read just kind of the first chunk of it here as it starts. As the fog of the culture war fades and the haze of disinformation dissipates, previously obscured lines have never been clearer. These battle lines cannot be moved, yet some believe they can. This position is at best naive, as it discounts why the fight started to begin with. In this piece, I will I will be confronting several issues close to my heart and will be asking the question, where is the line? And I like that in this, he kind of leaves it open like a little bit, he's just saying, look, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I've experienced. Like, where's the line here? Like, what, here's my line. What's your line? I mean, I feel like he's asking us all to question where our lines are and where's too far. Where will we not go? Where will we go? So, sorry, getting over a cold. So, the first part of this is titled "Accounting for Lost Lives and Limbs." I'll read a little bit of it. The true horror of this conflict is that the casualties are stacked highly on one side, and we've only just begun to count. A recent study has found that in the US from 2016 to 2019, nearly 50,000 gender affirming care surgeries have taken place. Of that group, 7% were aged 18 or under, 52% were 19 to 30, and the most common procedure was breast augmentation and double mastectomy at 56%, followed by genital surgeries at 35%. He lists a few studies in here. He talks about he talks about how the basic belief is that all these people are living their best lives, but hard data doesn't really show that. And he gives some stuff like a 2011 Swedish study he lists here that shows that someone who transitioned is 17 times more likely than the general public to die at their own hand. He also talks about the other things that are harmful other than just the procedure itself or the hormones itself. There are the things that are going to come out of it, like stroke, cancer, cardiovascular disease, probably hundreds of things we don't know about really yet, because this is just not studied actually, with some hard science like it should be. He talks about the rise in children taking it, and that's terrible, and that's really shit. I like that this is his line, and you know what, I agree with him on this. And this isn't a super popular line to have. But he says, the counter argument is that alleviating the psychological distress outweighs the physical risk, yet I don't think the risks have been properly weighed. And yes, these surgeries are destructive. And I'll repeat something I said months ago. If it was banned globally, I wouldn't lose a wink of sleep. It should be reserved for the most extreme cases, the most persistent, screened and cared for. But even asking for this isn't a sign of health. And, you know, I'm not sure exactly how he feels about like transition, but like for me personally, I don't believe it's a treatment. I don't think it should be offered as a treatment. It should be done away with completely. Transition is not a treatment for a mental health condition, period, full stop. He goes on, nothing is not better than something. And that's what many of us are left with. A sex which has been lobotomized through scalpels and hormones. That line right there, I think, cuts so fast to the, excuse the comment, meat of it. Lobotomizing our sex. That's what's happening. That is such a good way to put it. You are lobotomizing people's sex. And humans, we are integrated very much with what our sex is. I mean, it's our body mind is all one unit. It is not these big separate parts that I think so many people think it is. And even when we talk about these things, and even when I talk about these things, I have a habit of breaking it up. I think it's just the way culturally our culture just exists at this point in time. But your mind, your brain, your body parts, your sex, they are not separate parts. They are all one part. And taking away a person's cutting away and taking away someone's genitals, destroying someone's genitals and their ability to use to enjoy and use their body as it is meant to be used is a horrible thing. You know, I luckily didn't have any kind of genital surgery, but just, you know, even just my breasts being removed had impact, you know, had an impact on my feeling as a sexual person, you know. And I don't know, I just think I don't have much more to say to this. I just think that this lobotomizing of sex is such a great line in this. And he says long-term unbiased research as well as caution is desperately needed, and I will not be moved from this line. So that is his line. Another thing he talks about in this first part that I think is also really important is that he talks about how the rise in children taking these drugs is troubling. Reuters reports that from 2017 to 2001, 14,000 some odd minors in the US started hormones, and that this upward trend is repeated in the UK and Europe. However, these numbers still pale in comparison to the number of adults who are taking hormones, with estimated varying widely at around 50 to 60% those who have identified as trans or non-binary. That's hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And the reason he says this, and the reason I know that I also harp on this fact that yes, we should be protecting kids, but also don't just stop there and go, oh, this is horrible because it's happening to kids, and then not think about the rest, is because safeguarding is for everybody. It should be for everybody. Our society should, when it has a medical system, when it has a mental health system, these systems have a duty to safeguard the people coming to them for help, people who are ill or vulnerable or whatever's going on, right? And safeguarding should exist in a community and in a society, full stop, for everybody, not just certain people, not just certain age groups. And the common saying of adults can do what they want is just, I think it's just a line like trans women or women. It's just this line people spit out, and when they don't really want to think much more about what what they're talking about, what the whole system has to say, or what's really happening. Maybe they're just ignorant to the fact that as long as medical transition is a treatment that is given to people, it cannot also be said to be a choice that an adult makes unto themselves with clear head, mind, and presence. Because to be quite honest, anybody who wants to have a doctor hack parts of their body off and live a lie is not healthy. You'll never convince me that they are healthy. They're not okay. And if people were doing this for any other reason, we would be suspect. Now, obviously, there's cosmetic surgery, and many of an adult goes down the road of cosmetic surgery and does horrendous things to their body. There's my line. If you're paying for it yourself, if it's cosmetic, if the doctors are not performing it, if it's not a treatment, if it's outside of the medical system, something you're choosing to do, fine. But as long as it's inside the medical system, absolutely not. This should be done away with. Full stop. And it's something he brings up in here too. And I agree with this, and I've said it myself. What do you think happens at magic number 18? Or whatever the age limit is where you live? You're hoping that this is a fad. You're hoping your teen is going to be over this by the time they're 18. The likelihood that they'll be over it, I don't know, not as great as maybe you think. And at 18, they could still have these procedures. And I really think about that. I also understand the legal side of this and the winning over the hearts and minds side of this. It's easy to go after the underage first and knock that out. I get it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I understand. My only concern is the same people who say, well, we're going after, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen to kids first, and then we'll work towards, making sure that, everybody is safe. I don't know. I question if they might just drop it after they win the kid part of it. That's, it's just our society, though. Our society just doesn't give a shit for adults. So he talks about that. So the safeguarding front, he talks about just how, there are some parents that are transing their kids or that are abusive to their kids, and that's why their kids went to transition. And, that shouldn't be looked over. But there's also a lot of parents that are just ignorant of the whole thing, or confused, or feel forced into it, or, and that definitely sympathy is needed. And, you have to be cautious and stuff like that. But he brings up a good point here that I think is something worth thinking about. He says that despite the affirmation centric education system, children do have a degree of protection. But once they reach that mystical wisdom pilled age of 18, all bets are off. They're an adult. They can do it as they please, right? So, I mean, he put just like basically what I said, of course they can, but that doesn't mean you'd let them completely self-destruct or do something that will harm their future. You'd naturally urge caution and try your best to prevent them from making decisions that will harm them, especially if they're not in the right frame of mind and have existing vulnerabilities. Good point. He goes on to say, parents have been milked of their desperation, led by a carrot on a stick, with unspoken promises that somehow this will change their situation with their children. And speaking of safeguards, I don't think mixing parents into sisters is the best idea either, though I do think it's important both of our stories reach the public consciousness. I don't think we can help with any parent situation, and they cannot help with ours. I'm sorry. We're the ones who went too far, who stepped over the line, and now you want to ask us how to stop your own from doing the same. I wish I knew. And this is a really good point, and why I don't really, I've had parents reach out to me. I've even had parents ask me to talk to their kids, and I'm like, absolutely not. No, no, no. Um, First of all, I mean, I like to think I'm better now. I like to think I'm mentally stable now, but like, let's not forget that I am an adult that went down this path, believed this, and you know, um, went in and had these medical procedures done, and um, so like I, I was an adult that was in such distress. I was willing to, agree to have these things done. And also I bought into I bought into the ideology. And that's what's weird about this when you say kind of, to go back a little bit, when you say adults can choose, right? This is where this gets, I think, blurry, because there is part of this where it is an ideology and you're believing it and you're choosing, but then there's this other part of it where this ideology is now entrenched in medical care and mental health care. So like, you can both go in under your own accord without ever seeing a therapist and go, I want these procedures, and the doctors will do them. But you can also go to a therapist like I did and say, here are my problems. Here are these issues I'm having. I'm not sure what to do with them, and be completely led down the path of being told transition will help you. So it's kind of this weird, two things are happening together. And that's where it gets really confusing and kind of fucked up. So this is like, I did this to myself and I didn't all at the same time. It's, I don't know how to pick it apart, but that's what it feels like to me. So I think also, when he talks about not mixing, I completely agree. Especially a lot of there are some detransitioners and desisters that started their transition process in their late teens or early 20s. So they're kids themselves, right? You cannot mix these people with adults, with parents, because the vast majority of the sisters that I know don't have great relationships with their parents and come from some shitty home life. And, they don't have good relationship with their parents, and you're going to put them in a position to kind of be seen a person that's standing in as their parent, and it just doesn't go well. Also, it is completely toxic and not cool to bring anyone else into your family, any adult that you don't know, to like talk to your kid. Like, you talk to your kid. This is your business with your family. No one is going to save your kid. You got to do it yourself, and you got to figure out what's the best thing to do. And sometimes that means moving mountains. And just speaking for myself as a parent, I will move mountains for my kid. And sometimes you have to make a lot of sacrifices for your kids. He talks about the impact of transition overall, when an adult does it. He talks about family and just, friends and community and stuff like that, all things that are valid. This transition doesn't happen in a bubble. It's not just you. You're impacting your whole world, everything that touches you, everything around you. He talks about okay, the last two paragraphs here of this section. One of the reasons I focus on recovery and life after is that another hard pill to swallow is that some will go as far as I have, and only some may come back from the front. And if it's someone you love dearly, what are you going to do if that is the case? They will need you. My energies are focused on the forgotten majority. I will hold that line, that safeguards are for everyone, and sometimes they can be as straightforward as the word no. I think he summed it up just beautifully there. It goes in, and the next section is called the battlefield of discourse. He talks about when he first started the transition process, that he kind of stayed away from social media. We all know social media is just can be a complete train wreck and really twist your thoughts if you're not going out touching grass once in a while. All right, so in this section, he talks about social media stuff a little bit, and then he goes into some of the stuff that he sees on social media that he just thinks is in really poor taste and disgusting and doesn't like. And I'll just read this part here. And whilst there may well be a place for mockery, there comes a point where valid critique, let's back up a little bit here. Thinking back to transition, I avoided any online engagement, but did observe tepidly. I couldn't see the points being made because the barrage was so intense. The belief that shouting and mockery help is highly questionable. I think it has less to do with waking others up and more to do with hitting back, often in bloodlust. When has shouting and screaming, belittling, ever helped encourage discourse or critical thought? And whilst there may well be a place for mockery, there becomes a point where valid critique becomes straight up cruelty. Some indiscriminately take snipes at those who are heavily injured, faceless names in the scope of a screenshot. Of course, once I raise questions about the benefits of conducting ourselves in such a way, I am reminded at the war crimes of others. But these people are mostly faceless names. And while I understand the pain and the desire to hit back, it doesn't justify the action. I wish the same fervor was given to those who engineer and push lies, those who sever healthy limbs and stack bodies. Once the skill of destruction has been realized, I think the mockery will quickly turn into existential horror. We now have an entire generation of people castrated and sacrificed in the name of progress. I don't think it's helpful to mock victims, especially those who've done nothing to warrant it. And I will raise my eyebrow at those who continue to do so. This is a line I won't move from. And it works both ways. And I respect that. And I understand what he's saying. I do. And I agree with most of it. I think where it gets a little blurry is that because this is a ideology, because this is a belief system, you have people who are trans-identified, who believe the ideology, pushing the ideology, screaming at I mean, I've seen it myself, going to, say, school board meetings and screaming that they're screaming at the school board that they need to let boys into girls' locker rooms and vice versa because it's transphobic if they don't. And so in this cult, you are both victim and predator all at the same time. And I think that's what gets really hard to pull apart because, yes, these people are victims. These people are being injured. These people are being sold a lie. But these people also are participating in the destruction. I did the same thing. Parts of myself were sacrificed in this religion as well, but I also pushed the religion. I also spoke its truths, you know. So that's where it gets a little dodgy, you know. It's something to think about. So the next part is going AWOL. It talks about just how basically desisters can't, detransitioners or desisters can't talk about our experiences and our regret and how we believe we were sold lies and how we would believe that that you know, trans ideology is a shit ideology and that it's a cult and everything because we get called transphobic and we get silenced and no one will talk to us. And, you know, all true. I'm a lifelong Democrat and I've always considered myself a liberal, but I am ostracized completely from my group for the most part because I am now a horrible transphobe. Because I don't adhere to the religion anymore. So he talks about that. There's a okay, so there's the last paragraph in here really hit, and I want to read it. The hard pill to swallow is that we betrayed ourselves when we sacrificed our minds and flesh to the cause of gender, forfeiting our name, rewriting our histories to fit this new ideal. That's the real betrayal. Yet those who oppose us often forget that we are veterans ourselves and have already been in many battles. The sisters are your most formidable opponent. We are the wounded soldiers that came back for more. We shouldn't be underestimated. So I think in this paragraph right here, I think he kind of hits on what I just was talking about previously a little bit, that, you know, we were both believers and perpetrators and victims, and we sacrificed ourselves, but also we didn't do it alone. I think it makes coming out of this even more of a mind fuck, to be quite honest. Now, what I find the most interesting part of this essay is fragile alliances. I will just start reading this because I think it's worth reading. Sexology and queer theory are both aligned in their aims. One seeks to normalize taboo through theory, the other through culture change. But they are both one and the same when it comes to breaking well-established boundaries. Aligning with sexologists isn't the solution. And whilst I think there are merits in research, I'm always going to be skeptical of any theory that attempts to humanize some of the most or the more troubling paraphilias. Some suggest that prescribing to sexology will reduce the number of transitioners, under the premise that understanding their motives will help them learn not to give in to them. I only see that as another form of affirmation, this time more direct, as it endorses the paraphilia as a condition, like gender dysphoria. What can be said for one paraphilia can be said for many others. There's also an over-reliance from apparent self-aware AGPs that others with paraphilias can achieve the same level of insight as themselves, that they too can learn boundaries. But once we consider the overlap between autism and paraphilias and factor in that learning difficulties are often prevalent with autism and offenders, it becomes impractical to suggest that all people with paraphilias will also understand the social contract and the boundaries that come with them. The theory may be ringing some bells and a lot of truth, and I do acknowledge that, but there's a strong desire to paint everyone with a singular brush. So, I mean, I think he makes some really good points here, and I agree. I think the whole sexology thing is a bunch of nonsense, and I think it doesn't have a whole lot of merit, and I think it has a lot of biases in it, especially towards women and homosexuals. And it really does, he brings into question here. You're going to tell people it's okay to do these things or to embrace these things. And, I think, as I understand a paraphilia, it is I think there's a definite component of compulsion there, a driving force, much like an addict. And you are not going to help the addict by giving them a little drugs once in a while, to satiate them or teach them that they can do drugs here but not there. Anybody who's ever known a drug addict or an alcoholic knows that doesn't work. A person cannot engage with something that is ticking that lizard brain. Okay, they cannot engage with it if it's a problem. It just will make it worse. So having alliances with sexologists and other groups that think that a lot of this stuff is okay is really is not going to be helpful as far as that side of the whole trans thing goes. He says what seems to be getting missed in the conversation in sexology is it's very much a how we got here conversation, and it's simply not a priority. No one rushes to ask why a house is on fire as it's burning. They would be more concerned about putting the fire out. My claim is, and forever will be, that sexology may well have a place to understanding, but it isn't going to extinguish the flames and release people from the grips of this obsession. It's an obsession. You cannot engage with your obsessions. He talks about how, modern transition treatment is akin to conversion therapy. He mentions Donovan Cleckley, which I also like his writing. I think he does really good research and stuff. Okay, so this is a really good. I think this is a really good part right here, and this particular part goes into kind of why I made my Buck Angel video. Because I think that Buck Angel being in this conversation at all around transition is hypocritical. She doesn't belong here at all. She's still trans identified. She's still saying it's a good thing to do. She needs to get the fuck out. And every other trans identified person who says it's a perfectly reasonable thing for them to do, but maybe not for you, I want them to tell me, what is that line? Why did it work for you? Why is it okay for you to do, but not okay for anybody else? And you can't sit there and say that I am a trans identified person and it worked out great for me. And I think I did the right thing and I'm living a better life and I'm healthy and blah, 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 blah. And then have a detransitioner come on and talk about their experience. Like, that's just, it's warped. It's warped. And we have to call it, we have to call it as it is. But I think this is kind of what he's hitting on here, and I'll read it. And what about the good ones, the truest of the true, the real transsexuals? I'm sure their distress is real, but quite frankly, when push comes to shove, they do not sit on the lines they claim to. Some expect existing lines to be shifted just because they agree with the rallying calls or because they said something based. It doesn't take much for that line dancing to stop and for a tactical retreat to ensue once pushed. Yeah, true. This doesn't mean for a second that I can't be civil with those in transition, but allies, I'm sorry, no. You're still wearing your old uniform. Our values will clash, and the sisters and those in transition have done so. You're still wearing your old uniform. And that, for me, for Ritchie, and for a lot of sisters or detransition or whatever they want to call themselves, for us, the biggest part of the desisting was desisting from the ideology, desisting from the self-harm, desisting from the obsession, taking reality as it is, understanding that we were hurting ourselves, understanding that a system is hurting people. Okay, when we took off the uniform, right? We said no, thank you. We're not part of your group anymore. We don't believe in this. So how can someone who's still wearing the how can we ally with them? How can we talk to them? What are we talking about? Someone's going to have to give, and usually it's expected that it's going to be me that has to say, well, for some people, as long as they're adults, if it makes them happy, that thing drives me crazy. If it makes you happy. Did anybody not listen to the Sheryl Crow song? Sometimes you think something's making you happy, and it's not. So, yeah, I really liked this line. I thought he hit it right as bullseye all the way. Our values will clash, and they do. Those who claim to be lost in transition, this is the next paragraph, have never once attempted to desist, and if anything, have tried to place themselves in a position that allows them to continue tapping into the empathy often afforded to those who have left it all behind at great cost. Though it must be said that I don't view them as enemies either. The problem with forced teaming and the insistence on allies is the unspoken notion that if you're not an ally, surely you're an enemy. Yeah, like, we don't have to be allies. We also don't have to necessarily be enemies. Like, we could just stay in our own corners. Right? Like, those who call themselves an ally should be viewed with scrutiny regardless of what they're being an ally to. Many of these makeshift alliances were never going to work in the long run. They were always fragile, if not circumstantial, and just because the wider goal may be the same, that doesn't mean our values are in alignment too. I don't want allies. Allies can quickly become enemies. It suggests the relationship is based on terms, a common cause, or a goal to achieve. It's not real, and these relationships quickly collapse. I do not want to be forcibly teamed up, and I don't think it's an unreasonable line to hold. So I think I get what he's saying here. He might be viewing this stuff a little bit more personally than maybe I view it. Like, I mean, for example, if there is like a law that needs to be voted on, that needs to be passed, say, and I agree with the law, and a Republican also agrees with the law, and we both vote on it, even though I'm not a Republican or a conservative. Like, or maybe we wanted to work together on, like, raising awareness for this law or something. Like, I don't, that's like, I think that's okay. I think when it comes to political stuff, you do have to kind of have allies in a way. I'm not really quite sure how he's talking about allies here, but like, I can understand allies existing. But I think I would like allies with boundaries drawn. Like, I guess if I was to have an allyship with a group or somebody, I would be like, look, here's the line, here's the terms, this is what we're working on, but outside of that, no. And so, but I think he brings up a good point here, and I appreciate his thoughts on this and his feelings. And values, his talking about the values is really important, because I think a lot of dissisters have a very different set of values than maybe a lot of people do, and that can get dicey. Final thoughts. People like myself have found themselves to be ideal candidates for this movement and have become nothing more than a new generation of castrates. This is horrifying, not glorious or liberating. It's not just limbs that have been lost, it's relationships, futures, families, careers, marriages, and of course, hard-won rights continue to be scattered to the wind. Though there is suffering, I feel as if we have lost sight of the true enemies, and it's not as the propaganda posters will have you believe. They are the surgeons, the so-called professionals, legislators, and backroom activists who are causing the damage, not those being damaged. But these are just opinions, and opinions are not mandates. Where's the line? Where's the line is a worthwhile question we should all be asking ourselves, as well as each other. Great essay. I like it. I like that he's asking us to think about where those lines are and what we really want out of this. That's a question I've asked myself a million times over the last 4 or 5 years, and my answers have changed somewhat. And I think might continue to change. So yeah. Again on this, though, I will push back only a little bit on the whole, what I said before, is that when you are a believer in the religion, you are both preaching the good word, spreading the cancer, as well as letting the cancer eat you. And that's difficult. And I think, that's where it's hard to find where these lines are. It's hard to find who's ally, who your ally is, who, who can you let in the tent and who can you not? Who's at fault? Who's not at fault? The really sucky thing about this is that it's kind of like we're all at fault in a way, this ideology just didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a culture. It came out of a society that already had these beliefs. That's why it's taken hold so easily, and not just with LGBT people, as some folks like to tout. The base of the trans ideology is homophobia and sexism and misogyny, and this comes from every aspect of our society. This comes from men as well as women. This comes from black, white, brown, everybody in between. Christian, Muslim, atheist, liberal, conservative, everybody has held some of these really sick and stupid beliefs. And, I think we all have to take a look at what part we played, as well as what's going on and how we can change our direction to make things better, because you're here on this earth for a very limited portion of time. And I think if you want to look for what your purpose is, maybe your purpose is just make it a little bit better for the next person to come along, or maybe just a little bit better for when you exist. Anyways, go read his article. Ritchie's article is really good. And actually, most of the stuff he writes all the stuff he writes is good. And thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for sticking around. And have a great new year. I am recording this on New Year's Eve, so yay. See you in the new year, everybody.